All right, today we're going to go back to our Clay 101 series and talk a little bit about some of the options for baking your clay. What are the surfaces I like to bake my clay on and why? So stay tuned and see my thoughts on these three. Alright, so we are going to talk about the three types of baking surfaces I use the most in this video. And I know I touched on baking surfaces a little bit in one of the very first videos in this series, but I wanted to go more in depth on it today. So if you watch my clay videos, you know this is my go-to. And the type of paper plate I use is really important. It's the really cheap kind. There's no coating on it. First off, I already popped this off once, but then I realized that you couldn't see what I was doing. And I'm not sure how well the camera's picking this up, but basically the clay looks almost identical on the top and the bottom when you bake it. I actually took some of the scrap clay from last week's green onions project and baked off on my three surfaces so you can get a look at it. So the paper plates I use, they're these plain white. It's important that they're plain white. If there's a design on them, the design could bake into your clay. You could get, if there's, the inks could bake into your clay. If there's a wax coating on the plate, that could also bake off onto your clay. These are the super cheap ones. They come in a stack. I think my stack was about yay big when I bought it. I think there was like 1,000 plates, 500 or 1,000 plates in it that I buy at a time. And they're super, super cheap. You can use them 2 or 3 times before you throw them away. Sometimes you'll notice when I pull a project up on the table that I've baked that my plate's a little yellowed. Every time you put it in the oven, it gets a little more yellow, but it doesn't hurt it any. One of the things I love about baking on a paper plate, especially when I'm testing projects, because before I do a video, I don't know if you know, I usually bake off my clay. Even when I'm not doing a tutorial, I'll make a clay mix and I'll bake it off. And then I'll make notes on the paper plate. Like maybe I'll say one part this, one part that, and I'll have my clay stuck down. And I'll use it over in different areas. Also, I've done clay projects with groups before where we were able to put the name of the person on each paper plate. That way it's easy to identify whose is whose. So that's for that. That's the paper plate talk. The other thing, excuse the spots, my background's about ready to be thrown away here, ceramic tile. Now when I first started doing polymer clay, everybody used a ceramic tile. I prefer to bake on these little 6x6 tiles. They're a little easier to handle in the oven. The thing I don't like about them is, now the top looks the same as the other one. See if the camera picks it up. See how shiny that is? Most food isn't shiny like that. I'm trying to hit the light. But yeah, that gets really shiny and really smooth, and that's one of the things I don't like about baking on a tile. I do, however, always use the tile if I'm using liquid clay, because liquid clay will adhere to these paper plates and you won't get it off. So the tiles can withstand a high heat. Of course, clay doesn't. Your clay is going to burn long before any of these surfaces will. One disadvantage to the tile is this retains heat. You need a hot pad to get it out of the oven, and you have to let it cool a lot longer. These paper plates cool pretty quickly when you pull them out of the oven. So there's that to consider. The shiny surface is the main reason I don't use a ceramic tile very often. Now, a third thing that I do use often enough that I thought I would show it is sandpaper. This I use for a specific purpose, and I'm not sure, yeah, I think it's picking it up. I like to do doll cookies on sandpaper because it gives that texture like baked cookies have on the bottom. So sometimes I'll do my cookies on those. Again, your temperature in your oven does not hurt your sandpaper because clay burns at a relatively low temperature. The biggest disadvantage to the sandpaper is it starts to roll up, and the more times you bake on it, the more it will roll up. Also, it's kind of flimsy, so where I can fill this up with projects and carry it to my oven, if I have more than just like this on a piece of sandpaper, I need to put this on a surface, like on a clay tile, on a ceramic tile or something like that, because you don't want to dump your clay off of here. So those are the three surfaces I use the most. And sometimes in a project, I will have you bake on something else. Usually that's because I'm looking for a specific texture on the bottom. Like I showed on here, each of these gives a different texture on the bottom of the clay. All of them work just fine for baking. It's what texture am I getting on the bottom side of my clay, and do I care? And sometimes it makes a big difference, and that's usually why I vary the baking surface. So that's my thoughts on these different surfaces. If you have questions, be sure and post them either in the comments, on the video, on the blog post, or on the Facebook page. And talking about the Facebook page, if you haven't found my 18-inch doll Facebook page, I encourage you to follow the link in the description box. Come over and like the page. It's the quickest way to get a hold of me, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.